Great. So thank you for tuning into COVID-19 hurricane preparedness for your association. We have muted all the participant devices to eliminate the background noise so everyone can hear clearly. The view options on your screen can be adjusted to display all panelists by navigating to the view options on the toolbar. You can select the side-by-side option for optimal view. Feel free to submit any questions. We would love to hear from you. Just navigate to the Q&A option on the toolbar, and if you look at your screen, those are the instructions as to how to submit a question while we're in the webinar today. So let's go ahead and meet our panelists. Audrey, would you like to start first? Give us a little introduction as to who you are, what you do at Castle, and we'll move along by order of appearance.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for having me. Thank you for attending. I'm super excited to be a part of this panel. My name is Audrey Blackman. I have over 10 years of experience in property management in South Florida, and I am the Vice President for Miami-Dade with Castle Group.
Hi, everyone. My name is Megan Moore. I'm a partner at the law firm Weisbrod, Mattez & Copley. I manage the Florida office. We are a national boutique litigation firm, and my particular area of practice is in representing businesses, individuals, and of course, condominium associations against insurance companies. And in particular, I have been representing them for the past 17 years in hurricane-related matters. So I'm very happy to be a part of this panel and have an opportunity to speak with my co-panelists to you today.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. This is Ben Myers, Insurance Office of America. We're a Florida-based company, but we've actually grown into one of the top 5 largest privately held agencies in the country, and have even kind of have an international reach nowadays. And IOA is divided not so much by geography as it is by expertise. So, you might expect, because I'm here, I'm part of the real estate group. Specifically, I work for the Boca Raton office. So about half of what we do is apartments and the other half condos. And condos is kind of the bread and butter of what we do every day. And I love it. Been doing it over 5 years now. Really I've met a lot of great people at Castle. And with condos, you get to meet a lot of great board members as well. And, the thing about us, we like to really have a seat at the table. When you have your manager, you have your attorney, and just like you go to them when there's challenges, we want to help guide you through those challenges. So that's why I'm glad to be here today, answer any questions you might have.
Great, thank you so much. I'm very excited for this panel. So let's get started. What do you guys think? Shall we just dive into it? This is our agenda today. These are what we're going to be discussing. So obviously, this is a hurricane preparedness course, but COVID-19 is a reality, right? This is something that we're dealing with. We're not sure if it's going to go away anytime soon. So why don't we talk a little bit about COVID, especially now that the communities are reopening. Audrey, what best practices are you implementing at the communities for these procedures to reopen?
So as many of you are aware, the reopening plans will vary from community to community. From a management perspective, the best practice and really the non-negotiables in ensuring the safety of our residents and our teams is making sure that everyone's using their proper PPE, such as masks and gloves, and ensuring the teams have an ample supply to the PPE. At one point that was a concern logistically, trying to make sure that our sites have everything that they need. We've increased the frequency of cleaning in our high touch areas and the high traffic areas. We've marked off flooring. It's very common, you kind of see this when you're going to restaurants or to the grocery stores, making sure that we've squared off areas in the common areas, such as the pool deck, to ensure social distancing is practiced when in use. Some of our communities are requiring reservations to use amenities such as the gym or the pools in order to effectively manage the occupancy in these spaces and allow for proper social distancing. Another common issue is communities allowing authorized guests. So not every community has opened up the community for visitors, but in those who are accepting authorized guests, they're required to complete a general questionnaire. Some properties are using technology to minimize touch upon arrival. So some are receiving like a barcode that has already pre-registered the visitor. So that's been very beneficial, where in some sites they are taking temperatures. We've implemented dedicated entrances for the building and exits to kind of minimize cross traffic, right? So one way in, one way out in the building or in our common areas, amenities. As it relates to contractors and vendors in the community, they're required to wear PPE when on property at all times. Additionally, we required our vendors to inform management in the event, let's say, one of their employees has been potentially exposed to the community. Exposed COVID to the community. So if they've reported to their employer that they have a confirmed case, we expect our vendors to report that to us so we can take the necessary steps to protect our community. And then in consideration of many residents who've been quarantined in their home or now working from home, we've made adjustments to, let's say, our contractors who are allowed to do, let's say, emergency repairs or finish construction that may have halted in the unit. So we've adjusted this construction schedule to only permit during certain hours. So we're being considerate of those who are now maybe having to work from home or taking care of their, homeschooling and things of that nature, which is our new normal now, right?
And what about the sanitation of the high touch areas, right? What do you consider proactive versus reactive in cleaning procedures?
Well, as far as proactive, I think we've taken a whole proactive approach in general to COVID, right? So again, to be proactive, we made sure to increase the frequency of cleaning. In some scenarios and in some buildings, we're doing it as frequently as hourly. Elevators, main common areas that your lobbies, the amenity areas, the restrooms. We've installed hand sanitizer stations at all major entry points throughout the building for residents to use to make sure that we're reducing the transfer of germs. The only time we want to be reactive in cleaning is when there has been a confirmed COVID-19 case in the community. So part of our COVID plan that Castle has created for our sites is to make sure that the association has contracted with a vendor who provides the fogging or the electrostatic cleaning when there is a confirmed case of COVID. So what we don't want to see is our site scrambling to find a vendor and create unnecessary delays and disaffecting upon the notice of there's been a positive case in the building.
Right. Megan, are there any resources available for condos that can help them? Anything out there that will help them, especially for those self-managed properties who don't necessarily have the guidance of a management company?
Yeah, absolutely. And the stuff that Audrey talked about Castle doing is just spot on, appropriate, and keeps up with the regulations. The most important thing to do is to monitor all of the executive orders, not just from the governor and the county, but also from your municipalities. They have very specific orders like Broward, for instance. It's still that speak directly to community associations like condominiums in terms of the max capacity, 50% capacity can be open. Some of them say that you can only have residents and their family members, and that's only if approved by the condominium associations. So these municipality orders are much more stringent in places like Broward and Dade than they are in other areas of the state of Florida right now. And to be truly safe in these, I think the best practice would be to communicate with a condominium insurance lawyer who could guide you through some of those and help you put together a plan if you had any questions. It sounds like Castle is really on top of this, but for other organizations or condominium associations that haven't taken it to the steps that Castle has, you really need to try and consult a professional on this to protect the directors of the association, to make sure that they're taking the right steps to protect their community. So I would say get online and use the online resources to reference those executive orders, the municipality orders, but reach out to a professional, to a condominium association attorney or someone who can help guide you through this, and make sure that you have the right practices in place. And one other thing, which I obviously see that Castle is doing because they're keeping their vendors informed, it can be part of the vendor contracts. A lot of the vendors that I've spoken with that are assisting condominium associations say they've put them on retainer to do hurricane mitigation repairs in the event there's a storm. A lot of them are left in the dark in terms of what the current procedures are. And because these procedures are changing so rapidly, it is just really important that as soon as the association adopts a new plan in terms of what is expected of vendors, that they would communicate that to the vendor in writing, and that the vendor knows that they have to comply with those procedures when they're on property.
Great, thank you. And speaking of resources, we do have a COVID-19 response plan for reopening your community. So, that is for fun and for free. Just email info@castlegroup.com. We'd be more than happy to share that with you. That's not a problem. I actually have a question coming in right now, and this is regarding the staffing. So apparently they're experiencing some challenges, right, in reallocating the employees to monitor right, the pool and the amenities and make sure that they're abiding by social distancing guidelines, but at the same time, they're being negligent in other areas. So what do you recommend in that sort of scenario, Audrey?
So we've been very fortunate to have positive experiences as it relates to this. It's important to have a clear plan in place as to what is expected of the resident in order to safely use the amenities and communicate those expectations in advance to the residents. So everyone's prepared and knows what to expect, right? There are associations who are electing not to have a staff member monitor these common areas, and it could be because of resources. So in some of these scenarios, residents have required a sign release and require the residents to be responsible for disinfecting the area that they're going to use upon arrival and maybe upon departure. So in certain scenarios as well, when let's say the pools were closed, we repurposed some of the staff, like a pool attendant, and had them help us out on doing the additional cleaning. But in any scenario, Castle always encourages the board to obtain legal guidance, right, on how to responsibly reopen, and whatever plans we have in place, even the template that we've customized for all of our sites, we're reviewing that with the board and making the necessary changes, and of course, with the association's attorney.
Great. So I have a comment here from an attendee, and he's asking about HOA. So is there any variance to your answer if it were applied to an HOA?
No, I mean, it's really all the same. It's a matter of having a plan in place, making sure that it's customized to the needs of your community and the expectations of what the board feels comfortable doing. Do you have the proper resources to support that plan? And then again, making sure that your attorney reviews it and make sure it's in alignment with what is legal. Great.
Well, I know that insurance and COVID is a very hot topic. So let's talk a little bit about mitigation and the risks associated with COVID-19. So Ben, this is for you. From an insurance standpoint, is there risk in opening our common elements? And can these associations do anything prior to reopening that'll reduce those risks?
Well, I'll tell you that out of anybody, if anybody saw this coming, it was the insurance industry, because after the SARS pandemic in 2003, they put in exclusions for either communicable disease or virus or bacteria in almost every policy. And so whether or not an insurance claim would be covered, I hate to say it, but it's almost irrelevant because that's not so much of an insurance issue. But what you were touching on is also a risk mitigation issue. Look, everything that Audrey said, I mean, it doesn't surprise me knowing the Castle properties that I work with, but having plans like that. And then what Megan said is most important. And we've received some guidance from this from insurance directors and officers carriers who, have an interest, even if they're not covering a claim, and not having their board get sued that they're already covering. They've advised us that if you are going to reopen amenities or whatever plan you want to take, get a legal opinion. Megan said it, Audrey said it. It's very, very important that you consult the professionals and make sure that you have a written legal opinion. And really, as a board, that's doing what's required of you. The statutes require one thing, Statute 718, that you conduct your business in a prudent business manner. And by using the professionals in that way, you're doing your due diligence as a board.
Great, thank you. Is there any sort of insurance liability if we open the pool and someone claims to get sick from the pool? This is someone from Broward that just asked. And is that part of the association's coverage?
That will likely not. I mean, on 99% of cases, in terms of condo associations, it's virtually unheard of not to have an exclusion for communicable disease or virus or bacteria. You can find that in your policy, in your policy itself. Now, the policy is an 80, 90-page document. So really, you can ask your agent to point out where that's going to be. I've been having a lot of those conversations recently. But as far as the liability, look, you have your normal concerns when you reopen the pool, and I mean, there's liability associated with that. But as far as increased liability due to the COVID situation, as I said, it's kind of irrelevant from an insurance perspective because now they're determined not to cover those claims. Now, if a legislature or a judge compels the insurance industry to start paying claims, then there's been a conversation about that with restaurants that have closed, hotels that have closed, things like that. This is a little bit different. But if a judge were to compel the insurance industry to ignore the exclusion, then it's a whole different ball game. But going under that seems pretty unlikely. Going how it is now, insurance is kind of out of this one.
Well, if I could just add to that, Jessica, then, what you said about the risks there, and I think with the question from the attendee is a good one because there is a concern about exposure. We've heard about, especially with nursing homes and things like that, where the management, and here it's the board of directors, is really responsible for maintaining the safety and protecting, to the extent that they can as fiduciaries, the common areas for the residents. And so that's why I emphasized at the beginning, and I think Audrey did too, about the importance of following the guidelines, the CDC guidelines, having the reopening plan that is consistent with the law, and like Ben reiterated, communicating with professionals to protect yourself from that type of liability because you can rely on them, and that's a business judgment rule, and it will insulate directors from exposure to those claims. But it's really important for them to stay on top of the changes because these things seem to change rapidly. I mean, a new order comes out, it seems like once or twice every other week, and so I think it's best to consult a professional just to hopefully avoid that risk.
Well, I did get a question here, and I think they just want a little bit of clarification, but they're asking if someone does make that claim that we're talking about, saying that they contracted COVID-19 from an amenity, that the board would have to pay out of pocket for that, professional advice from the attorney.
That's the way it would be as there's an exclusion. And one thing that I want to add, because I've gotten some questions about this from some savvy clients, they say, well, then that's the general liability policy with those exclusions. What about directors and officers? As a rule, directors and officers excludes bodily injury, which this would include. And so, really, that does seem like something that would come out of pocket. Now, what is the association's liability? That's a whole different argument. And then I've been hearing a lot of conversations about that, what the success would be of cases against associations. But that's going to be one thing, that I think you should go to your association attorney for. And chances are, again, unless there were to be a judge or a legislature that would just say otherwise, the insurance is not going to step in. So that would be on the association if there were to be such a claim.
Well, that's not the best prognosis, but okay. I hope that answered your question over there. So let's move on and let's talk a little bit about hurricane preparation, right? So Audrey, tell me this, how does your COVID-19 response affect your hurricane plan?
So I think what's important is, that as we go through our plan, that we're practicing social distancing, right? So a lot of the stuff that goes into it are pretty isolated events, but there are, a part of our plan, things that will require people to come together. So, we call it buttoning up your property for a hurricane. So that's probably where there's going to be the largest impact, where the team has to come together and get your property prepared, right? We've also added, we have a hurricane checklist that's a part of that plan. And so this year we've made sure to include, as part of hurricane supplies, that we have an adequate stock of sanitizing products and the PPE, right? As a result of COVID's impact on travel, we may have residents who are going to experience their first hurricane season as they were unable to return home, right? So imagine that. So it is critical to educate these residents on the hurricane plan and make sure that there is an abundance of communication on hurricane prep, because they haven't been here in Florida with us, right? They typically made it back home before the season arrived. So that'll be kind of new for us. So we want to make sure that we're over communicating to our residents and making them feel comfortable in a situation that they haven't found themselves in before.
And what best practices do you have for hurricane prep in addition to
Well, there's plenty, but some key ones that I'd like to mention here is for residents, you want to ensure you're clearing your balconies or patios of furniture and all items, because everything becomes a projectile, right, during a hurricane. And closing your shutters, if any. So, the association does this as well for our common areas, but you want to go through that exercise of closing your shutters. There may be a bolt or a screw that was loose, or they may not open, and you want to make sure they're repaired and functional before the season. If you are seasonal and you were able to make your way back home, it's always beneficial to arrange this task to clear your patio and balcony in advance. And if you're not there to do it, make sure you have an agreement or something in place where someone can do it for you.
Right.
We normally hold a hurricane prep town hall for our residents, right? So we hold a town hall so residents can come down, ask questions. We brief them on our plan. But now that may need to be held via Zoom, right? So, because we have to practice social distancing. So I think because of that, we may increase the frequency of the town halls as well, just to give everyone an opportunity to have a rich town hall and exchange of information. Another critical best practice is to perform a dry run for the community. So this is what I was referring to. We literally have the team go through this exercise of preparing your building for a hurricane. So for example, same thing I just mentioned, we're closing all the shutters, we're storing away all your furniture. So maybe this year you decided to buy 13 new chase lounges for your pool deck, right? Do we have the adequate space to store that away now, right? So we want to make sure that we're not trying to figure this out when the storm actually arrives. Everything has its dedicated space to be stored away properly. Also make sure you know your property well. So for example, know where your flood prone areas are in the building and make sure you have a plan in place to protect them. Sometimes it's not obvious, right? But I trust that your manager is walking your property, and we have plenty of rainy, stormy events here that will be indicators of where our properties are prone to flood, right? So incorporate those into your plan. So
Great.
that's really like the gist.
To name a few. But these are all great ideas. And what I love about this is that whether you do have a management company or you're self-managed, right, it's a partnership at the board with their on-site team. So if there's anything that you hear here that you like, make a recommendation. The dry run idea is excellent, because you don't want to come up with these hiccups when there's like a storm coming your way. So that's excellent response there. So what about the idea of a hurricane management committee? Have you heard about those? Like, do you see sites doing that, creating a committee during the hurricane?
I have. So typically we would have associations who maybe would designate like a resident volunteer group or board members who have volunteered to assist the community in the event that the staff can't immediately report back to the property. So that's common. But I would love to ask the thoughts of Ben and Megan, right? So my question to them would be, if we do have a group of volunteers, should we appoint them as an official committee at a duly called board meeting? And if by doing so, are they protected by the association's insurance? Like a 2-for-1 question there.
Yeah, Megan, if I may, yeah, that's the answer is yes, you should, and the reason is because the answer to the second question is yes. If there's an appointed committee, be it a finance committee, be it a hurricane safety committee, whatever you may have, if it's appointed by the board of directors, the directors and officers coverage extends there. The one thing I want to mention is if the members of this committee are going to be physically doing things themselves. So, it's one thing to have, a committee that creates a plan and then works with vendors to get things done. If they're going to be people who themselves are going to go through and, be putting up shutters or handling shutters or working on the landscaping or whatever they may be doing, there are very, very cheap policies through the Hartford, through other very good carriers that are maybe $300, $500, a volunteer accident policy. If it's a board member working as a volunteer, they may not be covered by your, if any, workers' comp policy. So again, if you have members of that committee that are going and doing things physically themselves to prepare for the storm, I recommend asking for a volunteer accident policy. Again, very, very cheap, but cover you a lot. But as for the decision-making of that board, it would be covered by the DNO, the directors and officers.
Great, that's good to know. Megan, are you there? Hi, there you are. Can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear
All
me?
right. Yep, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, hopefully I'm back. I missed the last part of that question. My feed keeps cutting in and out, which is really unusual.
So we were mentioning that if we had a group of volunteers for the to kind of be a hurricane committee, right, and helping respond to any issues at the building in the event the staff can't report there, should they be appointed at a meeting, and at which would make them an official committee, which would then extend the insurance coverage to them.
You know, maybe I should dial in. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Okay, it's my computer keeps fading out, but I think it's a fantastic idea to have a committee that is really responsible for post-storm activities, and I would recommend that that those individuals obviously be versed in the condominium association's COVID-19 plan so that they can affect the plan in a fashion that is safe for all. But the most important thing that I would say is they need to document the damage. I tell you what, I'm going to dial in with my phone so that if my computer keeps cutting out, you can hear me. In the meantime, if you guys want to if pose questions to Audrey and Ben, I'll make sure that I'm on the telephone with you.
Sure. Yeah, we'll give you a few minutes to do that. No problem.
Thank you.
So let's talk a little bit about the financial aspect of preparing for a hurricane, and then we'll go back to Megan when she's back on. So what can my association do prior to hurricane season to be more financially responsible should we have damage from a hurricane? And this is coming from Miami-Dade County.
Yeah, so I'm sure Ben is going to agree with me. As part of your hurricane prep, you should meet with your insurance agent and understand your policy.
Absolutely.
It's important to be aware of your hurricane deductible and how the board intends to pay that deductible, right? So there are scenarios where the cost of damages will not trigger your deductible, but remains a significant cost to the association. So later on, we'll discuss lines of credit, which is a strategy to consider in funding the deductibles. But Ben, do you agree with me? They should connect with you, right?
I totally agree, because folks who are not familiar with condominium policies like this, I mean, don't realize the deductible is 3% of the building usually. And so let's say you have 10 $1 million buildings, and again, this is insurable replacement cost, not market value. That's $30,000 a building. Let's say you're on the coast, it's one $10 million tower. That's $300,000 in damage that has to be reached. While we're talking about this, we may hit this later, so I don't want to jump the gun too much. But the deductible, it's very important to always file a claim because even if you may not hit it, you never know. There's really two reasons. One, your deductible very well could be an aggregate deductible, so for the entire year. So let's say we have, unfortunately, we might have a storm in August, and then maybe we don't surpass our deductible then, but then we have a storm in September. You pick up where you left off with the last one, so you have less of a gap before the insurance company starts paying. The other thing, right before this, I was on another Zoom call with one of my clients who is in the process of reopening a claim from Hurricane Irma because they had a roofer come in, and really there's much more extensive damage than the adjuster from the insurance company initially knew. And so they're reopening a claim. It's within the 3-year timeline. But if they didn't file a claim initially, they wouldn't be able to do that. Now they could be collecting a decent amount. So it's very important to do that. And, again, not to get too off topic, because what Audrey said is very important. The deductible, you have to know what it is. It's probably going to be 3% or 5% per building. It may be 2 or 1, but those have gotten very, very pricey recently, as has a lot of insurance. But know your deductible and know how you're going to pay, because if there's a storm that strikes, that big deductible is the one that you have to pay.
Should they have a line of credit? Can their line of credit pay for that deductible, or is that just a good best practice to have, Audrey, during hurricane season?
Yeah, so having a line of credit has really become a best practice to ensure the association has access to capital in the event of an emergency, right? So there's typically 2 lines of credits that are available to the associations. There are one that So there's a specific purpose, right, which are normally tied to construction type projects with uncertain cost estimates, right? You can arrange a line of credit to cover construction costs and then some type of term loan to replace the line of credit, right? So think of a credit card, right? So you borrow the money, but you have to figure out where you're gonna pay that those funds back. Another good example would have to be your line of credit to fund your regular insurance premium instead of using the standard premium finance agreements, right? So that's one option. The second general type is an emergency line of credit. And so that has no specific purpose. And it's a good example we could use to fund a hurricane deductible, for example, in the event of a storm.
And Jessica, can I add one thing to that? There's one other place where some of that money could come. And, you know, I always get, you know, kind of iffy answers to this question when I ask boards, how many of your unit owners carry an HO6 policy, are insured? But if they do, then the state mandates that they have at least $2,000 in loss assessment coverage. And so that is, if there were to be a loss from a hurricane and you were to assess the unit owners, you know, the ones who have insurance, you know, they can get $2,000, you know, from each one. And, you know, for the ones who don't have insurance, well, then they saved $2,000 last year and the year before and the year before. So, you know, they get billed at $2,000 bucks, but you can definitely get a substantial sum from that loss assessment that can get you part of the way there, depending on how big your deductible is.
Nice. Okay. And so this association, right? This ideal association that's going to get this line of credit, how do they need to be positioned, right, to be able to get this line of credit? What is the ideal profile of for the lender?
Well, if you have a management company, they would be very familiar with this process and would supply all the information the bank requires to kind of, and will facilitate the process with the board and the bank. If you're self-managed, you can typically expect that you need to provide a copy of your financials, your delinquencies, your year-end budget, your year-end audit, your budget, and your governing documents and other various documentation that typically your association should have readily available to support their financial position.
And can you immediately write checks once you have this line of credit approved?
Once it's approved, generally, yes, you can immediately draw on the loan.
Great, good to know. Megan, how are you doing over there?
But I do want to say one quick thing in regards to the line of credit, and Megan can add more, but typically you want to make sure that you can do so and it aligns with your governing docs.
Great. So Megan, are you with us?
I am with you. Thank you for your patience. I'm on a different internet provider now.
Oh, that fast.
Yes, thank God.
I think my cable company would respond that fast to my internet issues. Okay, so we talked about finances, we talked about insurance. So let's go into the legal perspective of hurricane prep. So I'm just going to back up here. Right, and I have a few questions for you. So what can associations do now to maximize their recovery in the event they need to submit a hurricane claim in the future?
This is like my favorite question because it saves me so much time later. So the most important thing that an association, whether it's a condominium association or homeowners association, can do right now is document the condition of their common areas. And I mean, if you have a roofing contract with somebody that comes in and fixes and maintains your roof, make sure it's serviceable, have that expert document that there are no active leaks, that the roof is in good condition, and have that done right before hurricane season or in the middle of hurricane season. As long as you have it before a hurricane hits, you're going to be in much, much better shape. Now, there are other areas of the building that are very vulnerable to hurricanes. And some of them are more difficult to detect damage than others. Those are fenestrations, things like windows and doors. They can be damaged, and it can be difficult to see that damage, and it can be difficult to even see the water intrusion from that damage until sometime after the storm. So it typically takes somebody that has a little bit more expertise to be able to document that. If you have access to someone who is a window expert or a engineer, that's great. If you don't, somebody who has, we've used former insurance adjusters to go in and take pictures and photograph because they know what the insurance company is looking for. Public adjusters do as well. But you really want to document the condition as being in good condition. And if you can't get to every window or every door, you can start with the association documents, the things that they actually maintain. Look to see if there are unit owner complaints of water intrusion, and make sure for every record of a complaint by anyone, you have a corresponding record of repair. As long as you have that, you can prove that you did repair the damage, you don't have any water intrusion issues prior to the storm. That means all the water intrusion issues after the storm are going to be presumptively related to the storm or caused by the storm. So that is really important. Record keeping is really important. Documentation is really important. If you can't hire an expert and to go through, you can always have a staff member or somebody take a video camera before the storm, take photographs before the storm, ask unit owners to take photographs of their windows before the storm. Do what you can to get a really accurate picture of what the building looks like prior to the storm. Another thing you can do prior to the storm, and it can be part of your hurricane plan, like Audrey mentioned earlier, go ahead and put on retainer, water mitigation, loss mitigation, emergency repair companies. Negotiate with them in advance when you can secure yourself a price and a place in line, so that after the storm hits, those vendors will respond to your community first, and they will already have your COVID-19 plan, and so they're going to know to comply with that plan. Mm-hmm. So those are things that you can do in advance of a storm to really improve the position of your claim following a storm.
Yeah, I can tell you from personal experience during Irma, there were many non-local companies that were just surging resources down here, but you don't know them, you don't know if they're insured, they're knocking on doors trying to get work. And then they're also price gouging. So these bills were astronomical and you don't know where they're coming from. So it's hard to go after them afterwards. So you're absolutely right. Yeah, talking to your vendors beforehand is definitely something to do. If the board elects to hire consultants or contractors to do this documenting that you were speaking about, contractors to document the condition of the condominium now and to perform emergency repairs following a storm, what factors should they consider given COVID-19? Sorry, there were a couple of typos here from the question that came in, so try to get through it.
No worries at all. I think I definitely have the gist of it, and that is exactly what I was alluding to earlier in terms of making it part of your vendor contracts, your COVID-19 response, making sure that they are informed about what the association requires. And another really important point that I've encountered with some vendors is they need permission. They need some type of a permission letter from the association that gives them access, because a lot of times city governments will preclude access to areas that are affected in a major way by a storm. But by having your vendor under contract with the right of access letter, they will be able to pass directly to your building and assist in the repair process. You'll be able to trust them. And it just goes so much better for the association.
Ben, I have a question for you. Is there a roof failure? If there is a roof failure and it causes damage to unit owner's property, who is responsible for paying that bill to fix it?
Okay, so this comes from what I mentioned earlier, Statute 718 of the condo law. It breaks down exactly where it is. So let's say the building is destroyed and is reconstructed, and you walk into your unit, what you're going to see is just barren walls, barren floors, rough piping, rough wiring coming out. There's not going to be any tile, any wood, any cabinetry. It's not just the items you move in with and move out with. It's also really everything on your side of the drywall. Everything that you look at when you're inside the unit is on the unit owner's responsibility. And, that touches on what I mentioned earlier with insurance. I mentioned it in terms of the loss assessment coverage, but, a lot of folks don't realize that, the association's responsibility ends at the drywall, and they reconstruct the structure of the building, and then everything else, the wallpaper, the paint, is on the unit owners. And so, there are handy screens. You can always ask me. We have a nice, I think my email's at the end. We have a nice little breakdown of, unit owner versus association responsibility. But you can also look right in the statutes of 718, and then they break it down right there, and they mention specifically.
Thank you. So I think we're getting to the question and answer portion of our. Actually, we have some more on insurance. What coverages do we need, and what should we know about our deductibles?
Well, okay, so I did jump the gun a little bit earlier because your deductibles really just know what type it is. There are really two different variables with your wind deductible, as it's called, that'll cover hurricanes. It can be either a hurricane deductible or a named storm deductible. And so if it's a named storm deductible, that means that a tropical storm also triggers that deductible. Frankly, it's worse, because otherwise tropical storms would have a much lower deductible. And then also, so you have hurricane and named storm, you have calendar year or aggregate or per occurrence. Calendar year aggregate, and it could be either calendar year, meaning 2020, or for the policy terms, if you renewed on June 1st to June 1st. And so that's where if you have multiple storms, which a lot of people are saying we might have, though they never tend to get it right. Hopefully they don't this time. But when you have multiple storms, the deductible does not reset. And so if you don't hit it the first time and a second storm comes or a third storm comes, you don't have to hit that deductible every single time. Whereas if you have a per occurrence policy, that deductible is going to reset with every storm, and you're going to have to reach it with every storm. So again, that's worse. You ideally would have a hurricane, calendar year, or policy term aggregate deductible is what you really want to have. Aside from your deductible, really have an idea of what's covered. You should have, your appraisal is what should be covered according to the statutes, and your agent should be presenting to you every year a schedule of values. And maybe there are things that you want covered that aren't covered. Not all appraisals cover all outdoor property, and some go into more detail than others. And I think you want to have a good idea of what's covered, what's not. And there are also, finally, just a couple ancillary coverages, the property policy, for example, debris removal. Believe it or not, that's something that would ordinarily be excluded. If, you have to be sure it's on the policy, and you can get it up to 25% of your loss. Ordinance or law, you have a situation where there's, you don't have any impact glass in the windows, and you need to reconstruct the building, and you have to upgrade those to impact glass. And that's one of many costly projects you've had to do because the building was built in 1985. That's going to get very costly because remember, the insurance is going to put up the building exactly as it is now. They're not going to upgrade it even if code requires it. So you got to be sure you have ordinance or law coverage. And that debris removal, and then, there are quite a few others. I could go, on for an hour, but really, I would have an idea on those two in particular of the ancillary coverages and know your deductible well.
Well, here's an interesting question that just popped up. Someone's asking if you can actually use your reserves for deductibles.
I believe so.
Yes, in fact, it's really important for you to have reserves that can cover your deductibles. I know that Audrey talked about some other options you have, especially when there's an emergency order in place that a board can actually go take out a line of credit, and that it's great to preemptively do that. But you can plan and should plan for your deductibles because you know what they are. So that's a really important point. Jessica, I wanted to comment on something that Ben said earlier when I was sort of half in and half out. He mentioned that he had a client or someone that had a claim, a Hurricane Irma claim. And there's something that I think it's really good for people to be cognizant of the fact that storms are all incredibly unique and incredibly unpredictable. And one of the things that we noticed with Irma, because of how long it lingered, it caused so much more latent damage, like undiscoverable to the naked eye at first damage, that we found that when engineers were going out to assist condominium associations with just routine, structural, concrete, maintenance type issues that they have to do, they were noticing significant amounts of hurricane damage, wind damage around like the windows and the doors of the condominium facade. And they were informing people for the first time, like happened in Ben's case, that, boy, you know what? You have significant hurricane damage here, and it is going to cost more than your deductible to repair. And so when I talk about getting someone to go out and document the condition of your property because you want a baseline to show that it's in good condition so that you get your claim paid, you're also doing yourself a favor to do it quickly, so that if you get someone out there to analyze the property right now, if they see any of that latent damage, they can make a claim before the deadline, because there are only 2 months before that 3-year anniversary. And that's the deadline to make a claim, supplemental claim, or reopen a claim. Yeah. So on the positive side, if the person that goes out sees no damage, you have the perfect report of the proper and excellent condition of the property. But if they do see that there is damage, it can be addressed when we have time to do so. So that is something that I recommend to clients if they have the opportunity to do so.
Thank you. I have a bunch of questions coming in, and we do have a question and answers portion. So give me a couple of seconds, guys. I want to ask Ben a couple more questions, or actually the panel in general, because we did talk about the vendors, and I'm wondering if there are any other contractors other than obviously the water remediation company that you should have on a retainer, or that you should have contracts already negotiated prior to the storm. So are there any others that we want our associations to have on file?
I would have a clear conversation with your landscaper.
Yeah.
And you have a procedure in place. That's one of those things that needs to be fixed right away. That comes to mind immediately. But the ones that Megan and Audrey were mentioning, in terms of water remediation, that's very important as well.
Yeah, someone to tarp your roofs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, roofers, right.
Great. Okay. Ben, do insurance companies write bulk policies for unit owners?
They do not. They do not. Now that's personalized. That's technically not in my, but I get that question every once in a while. I've heard of some companies doing it, but at an outrageous premium. I mean, really, it's not common enough, and it's not a good enough pricing where it would make sense.
I see. All right, thank you guys. So let's get some more questions from our attendees. So let's move back a little bit, right? We have someone here asking about the volunteers, right? About this hurricane committee. If these volunteers monitor CDC guidelines at a pool, this is for COVID, at a pool, for example, and they get into an altercation with another resident over social distancing, is the liability from the board members extended to them?
Wow, that is a really difficult question, and I would be concerned. I would be very concerned about that, because the board would be obviously allowing those volunteers to be there for that purpose. And so I would check with my condominium attorney. I would definitely ask that question. I don't have an answer for you. I think it's going to be a gray area. I don't know if Ben or Audrey have some input on that, but I know I would be concerned as a lawyer.
It's definitely a gray area, but I'm going to go with yes. I've spent a lot of time giving the bad news about the COVID exclusions, but what we're talking about in that example, Jessica, is not really somebody being injured because of COVID, but rather because of just operations the board is doing to prevent COVID. What's excluded is somebody saying, oh, I got COVID because the board was lax in enforcing these rules. If somebody's being enforcing too much, there are a couple different ways. Now, an altercation, that's not good. I wouldn't want that on your loss run. But it could possibly be covered by your general liability, or possibly even your directors and officers policy. I'm going to say that very well would likely be covered.
Okay, and we're actually running out of time, guys. So I have one more question. Okay, so is an association responsible for replacing a sliding glass door and the sliding glass door frame and sliders that are damaged as a result of a hurricane?
Yes.
So yes, yeah, they're considered to be common area expenses.
Great. Well, that was pretty. That was nice, short, and sweet. And I know you guys are so sad to see us go, but before we do, I definitely want to say thank you so much to our panelists, Insurance Office of America, and Waste-Broad, Mateus, and Copley. Thank you guys so much, Ben and Megan. You guys were great. Audrey, we really appreciate it. If you want to reach out to our professionals for further questions, this is your information here on the screen. So quickly jot that down and check out their websites and send them a quick email to thank them. And if you have any other questions, I'm sure they'll take the time to respond to you. And as you know, yours truly, Jessica Raffo here. We are Castle Group. Again, if you want that COVID-19 response plan, we'd be more than happy to share that with you. Just write an email to info@castlegroup.com and follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook, because that's where we promote all of these webinars, all of these templates and resources. We usually put it on social media. And that's a great way to access all this information. So thanks again for being here. Any closing remarks, guys?
No, thank you for having us. And it's always an honor to be associated with the Castle event. You guys always do a wonderful job.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. And if anybody has any follow-up questions for any of us, I'm sure that they can get our emails from you, right, Jessica? And
absolutely.
we'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you for your time, both the panelists and all the residents and attendees on the call.
Thank you, guys. All right, well, have a great afternoon, everyone.